Keyaru is an incredible yet disgusting loner, who possesses an incredible power to heal any being, hell-bent on revenge against some enemies from his past life who made his life unbearable. He is ready to do anything to make them pay. Before this happened, Keyaru woke up from a bad nightmare some days to his birthday. He had heard a voice in his head telling him to get stronger, which he finds confusing. At that moment, a girl named Anna comes in, and when she sees how sweaty Keyaru is, she takes a napkin and attempts to clean his sweats off, but Keyaru declines her kind gestures and tells her that he would be fine. Anna notices how Keyaru is acting and asks him if he had the nightmare as usual, and he immediately confirms it, telling her that it is the same nightmare where he became a hero and fought with the demon lord. Anna smiles and reminds Keyaru of how he had told them he would be a hero who would save the entire village when he was young. However, Keyaru dismisses the topic and tells Anna that he has limitations, but she asks him the class he has his eyes on since he would soon become an adult. Hearing this, Keyaru tells her he would be happy with any great class he is chosen for, but he would not forget to repay Anna for her kindness for raising him as if he was her real son. Keyaru heads for the farm so as to go and harvest apples, but as he admires the apples they got from the harvest, he hears the voice in his head again telling him he should obtain the sight of the spirits, so that he would be able to have the sight into all creations. Keyaru becomes confused as the apple he is about to pluck begins to change its form into a type of red crystal. Suddenly, he begins to walk into the forest, and begins to wonder why he is not in control of his body as he does not know where he is heading to. On getting to a river, he stops, noticing the changes in the river, until suddenly a star spirit appears to him and asks what he wants, which he immediately tells that he wants to acquire the sight of the spirits. The star spirit commends him for what his ancestors had done to save her kind and moves closer to kiss one of Keyaru's eyes that changes form and makes Keyaru see the status of the spirits, which makes him fall suddenly upon the ground and goes into a trance. In this flashback, the demon lord faces the flare, blade, and bullet with Keyaru in the rear, watching as they all fight to defeat the demon lord, who defeats them and injures Flare. Flare falls down and Blade yells at Keyaru to heal her as they are all out of elixir. Blade adds that they kept him alive so that he would be able to heal them once they are injured. But hearing this, Keyaru smiles and sees his chance to free himself from their bullying and begins to walk towards Flare, as he tells them that he would not heal them because he has been waiting for the chance to defeat the demon lord himself. Eventually, Keyaru uses his healing magic, which has changed over time, to defeat the demon lord, and retrieves a jewel from the demon lord, after assuring him that he would start the world over again. Flare stands up and claps for Keyaru, who realizes that she has hidden an elixir and Bullet and Blade are dead. Keyaru tells Flare of his intention to start the world over again and assures her that he would have his revenge on her. Finally, Keyaru wakes up from a trance and remembers all that had happened in his past life. He regains his memories and remembers that he was a healer in his previous life, and he also recognizes the gift of the falcon's eye, which he collected from the star spirit. Then he begins to smile as he tells himself that his revenge has started, as he would make sure he destroys Flare, who had made his life a living hell in his previous life. On his birthday, Keyaru gets chosen as a hero, just like he was in his past life, and his status was a healer as well. And in order to plan his revenge well, he begins to eat narcotic plants so as to get resistance and tolerance to them, because he knows he would be turned into a drug addict. A few days later, Princess Flare, with the giant cannons on her chest and her soldiers, comes into the town, and they ask about a hero who has just been chosen. The whole town becomes happy that Keyaru is chosen as he follows Flare and her soldiers. On the way, Keyaru uses his falcon's eye to look at the strength level of the soldiers and realizes that the only strong person amongst the soldiers is the commander Leonard. Flare assures Keyaru on the way that she would teach him a lot of things as she is more experienced than he is. On getting to the imperial capital, Keyaru recounts the story of how the capital was made by trampling upon the demi-humans living there before and making them slaves, but then he flatters Flare by telling her how beautiful she is. In the palace, Keyaru sees the king's strength and decides that he would not have his revenge when the king is around. He also notices that Norn, who is Flare's younger sister, is also not around, which means he has nothing to be worried about when planning his revenge. The king sees Keyaru's status, and he gives him the title of the Hero of Recovery, just like he did in his previous life. After accepting the king's offer, Keyaru is asked to heal the kingdom's great swordsman, who had lost an arm in a battle. Later that night, While Keyaru lays on his bed thinking about how rough heroes have their lives, someone enters his room.
Wait a minute!
A maid walks into his room, moves closer to him, and immediately takes her clothes off. The maid begs Keyaru that they should have a plot together. This shocks Keyaru as he asks her what she is trying to do. The maid tells him not to be scared as she proceeds to give him a kiss on his lips. At that moment, Keyaru remembers that the people believe that if a common person works out with a hero, such person would go past their normal potential and get stronger. And he continues to have plot with the maids every night, while they all make happy noises, while but Keyaru also gains more experience from them. Few days after continuing to work out with the maids and gaining experience from them, Keyaru meets the great swordsman Kureta as she has arrived at the castle. She kneels and tells Keyaru to heal her, which he did. But as he heals her, he is able to see through her memories, which makes Keyaru faint after healing her. Kureta becomes happy and thanks Keyaru, who is on the floor needing great help. When Kureta left, Flare tells the elder with her that Keyaru is useless to them as he is weak and instructs to make him stronger by any means possible, even if it is with drugs or brainwashing. Flare becomes disgusted and calls Keyaru a filthy cunt as she leaves, but unknown to her, Keyaru, who is now awake, is excited that she is the same as she was in his previous life, which would make him eager to have his revenge on her. Later on, Keyaru stays in his room and begins to act hysterical as he tells the elder and Flare that he would not use his healing magic anymore because of the awful things he would be seeing in other people's memories. Flare moves towards him and tries to persuade him to use his powers, but he disagrees, and after trying for a while, she tells him that she understands and she would not force him to do anything and leaves with the elder. Later, Keyaru recounts that he is reliving what had happened in his past life, and he also adds that he believed Flare was a good person in his previous life, which made him agree to use his powers then because he wanted to be useful to her. But now that he knows she is a bad person, he would not be deceived by her smile this time around. A maid enters Keyaru's room and brings in tea, which he asks why. The maid replies that the tea is a gift from Flare. Knowing that Flare has drugged the tea, Keyaru tells himself that he has to have courage in order to take the tea. After taking the tea, Keyaru becomes dizzy and finally falls down due to unconsciousness. Later, Keyaru wakes up and finds himself in a dungeon as he is being beaten by Leonard the commander, and when he asks Leonard what he had done wrong, Leonard tells him he had refused to heed to Flare. Keyaru falls down due to pain and tells Leonard he had given him 28 lashes, and he would never forget that. But as Leonard tries to hit him again, the elder tells him not to destroy Keyaru as he is his test subject. The elder then proceeds to give Keyaru some drugs and makes him addicted to it, but every night, he gets visitors that are sent in to him by Flare, and these visitors were heroes who wanted to get stronger. The females would come to work out with him, and the males too would also work out with him through his rice cakes. One night, Flare visits Keyaru in the prison and begins to maltreat him, and as she sees that he is going crazy as he has not been given drugs, she takes a bottle of drug and tells him to sit up to beg for it. She also treats him like a dog and kicks his mini sausage as she pours the drug on the floor and makes him lick it while using her feet to step on his head. From that day on, Keyaru is used to heal people in the day and gets violated in the night, and this continues every day, but Keyaru tells himself that he has prepared for it, and he knows that as soon as his tolerance for drugs goes up, he would awaken. 6 months later, Flare visits Keyaru, and she pours the drugs on the floor as usual, but as he finishes it, he becomes aggressive. When he moves closer to her, she gets scared and throws the bottle of the drug at his head, making him bleed. Keyaru stares at the broken pieces of the bottle, and he begins to regain himself as he remembers who he is and his target, Flare, who made life a living hell for him. As Flare leaves the prison, she tells the elder that she needs to get rid of her dress as Keyaru's stench is on it, and she cannot stand him. Keyaru stands up and checks his status, and when he sees that he has gotten stronger from the powers he has gotten by gaining experiences from the people he had healed, he tells himself he would make sure Flare pays for what she has done to him. Few days pass and Keyaru gets information from what he heard from the guards that the king has traveled to another country, which makes him decide to begin his revenge. Keyaru removes the chain in his neck with his powers and also breaks out of the prison, while he decides that he would make sure Flare begs him for death, while he has fun taking his revenge on her. Soon the guards begin to look for him, and Flare also wonders how Keyaru is able to escape from the prison with the state that he is in. Then, she becomes interrupted by Leonard, who drags Keyaru in as he announces that he has captured him. Keyaru tries to speak, but Leonard pushes his head on the floor and tells Flare that Keyaru had said something that they are not supposed to ignore, and it is something confidential. Flare instructs the other guards to lock Keyaru up, while she invites Leonard to her chambers to hear what Keyaru had told him. Leonard goes to Flare's chambers, and she teases him that it should be an honor for him to be able to enter her private chambers, which Leonard thanks her for. Then, when she asks him what Keyaru had told him, he immediately wields his sword and kills the two guards protecting Flare. Then he tells her that he had copied the technique from Korea when he healed her.
Wait a minute!
Flare becomes shocked and immediately asks Leonard who he is, but he ignores and suddenly grabs her melons and rips her clothes off, while she falls down, revealing her giant cannons. Leonard grabs Flare by her face and begins to take her powers, and when Flare asks him why he is doing that, Leonard's face changes completely to Keyaru's face, who tells her that her favorite dog has come to play with her. Flare asks about Leonard, and Keyaru tells her that he had exchanged their bodies and killed him for the 28 lashes he gave him. He adds that he has come to thank her for treating him like a dog and getting him addicted to drugs. Flare begins to beg Keyaru and tries to explain to him that she gave him the drugs for his own benefit, as he was fainting every time he used his powers. Keyaru recounts all what Flare has done for him, and he asks if that is her way of showing her kindness, but Flare becomes surprised that he remembered everything she had done to him. Keyaru immediately lifts Flare up by her neck and asks if she would play a game with him. Hearing this, she becomes confused as she wonders what Keyaru would do to her in order to get his revenge. While she continues to wonder what her fate would be, Keyaru takes one of her fingers and breaks it, causing her a lot of pain as she screams out loud, thinking someone would hear her voice and come to rescue her, but unknown to her, nobody is able to hear her scream. Keyaru tells her that she should be able to feel the guilt of everything she has done to him if her body gets messed up. Flare begins to beg Keyaru and offers him money, power, and women, but he ignores her and breaks another finger. Then, Keyaru tells her that he would break every finger on her hands, but if she is able to keep quiet while he breaks the fingers, she wins, but if she is not able to hold the pain in, he would win. Flare uses her other hand to cover her melons.
Did you pray today?
Flare begins to cry and tells him she would endure the pains, and he tells her he would be sure to keep his promises and like her. Keyaru continues to break her fingers, and she also begins to hold in the pain without screaming, but she continues to weep profusely. Keyaru immediately tells Flare while breaking her fingers that she is trying hard, and he is proud of her. Then he heals her fingers, and it all goes back to how it was before. He tells her that he has lost, but when Flare thinks she is free, Keyaru tells her they would have to start again, but as she tries to struggle, he breaks one of her finger, which makes her scream, and he tells her that he has won.
Wait a minute!
Keyaru heals her again, and also makes her crippled. As she is not able to use her legs, he takes off her dress and drags her on the bed. Keyaru proceeds to remove his clothes, and when Flare tries to run, she notices that her legs are not working. Then he tells her that he has used his corruption healing on her, so that he would be able to violate her. Flare becomes scared and tells him that he cannot violate her as she is a princess, and she would not allow him. He slaps her, and he proceeds to put a rod inside the fireplace. Then he tells her that he would make her choose the kind of rod she would like to take between his own rod and the rod in the fire. She immediately tells him that she wants his own rod. Meanwhile, the hot rod has started to burn the room. Then Keyaru pulls Flare by the hair, and he tells her that she is a good toy and that he would erase her memories and change her face, but Flare begins to beg him not to do so. But he tells her he would give her a chance to restart her life once he changes her face and erase her memories. Keyaru changes her face and erases Flare's memories, which after she loses consciousness. Then Keyaru becomes excited as he feels good after his revenge on Flare. Keyaru escapes the palace with Flare, and he leaves a corpse with Flare's face, so as to make others believe that Flare is dead and also make it look like it was Leonard that killed her. While in an inn in the village, Keyaru looks at himself, and he admires his body like charm. Then he begins to think of what to do next as he recounts that he would have his revenge on Bullet and Blade as well before he goes to meet the Demon Lord to know what she was trying to protect. While Keyaru decides that he needs to be strong so as not to be able to be defeated by anyone, Flare wakes up and begins to wonder who she is. Keyaru goes to meet her, and after he hugs her, he tells her that her name is Freya, and she is his attendant. He adds that she must have forgotten everything because she had collapsed due to a high fever. Then he tells her that they both love each other, and while he tells her this, he uses his magic to make her believe the new information he is telling her about the both of them. Flare believes that she is Freya and Keyaru, tells her that they should work out so that she would be able to remember. Then he also tells her that she should beg him like she always does, and after repeating the words he carefully chose to disregard her, they both work out. The following morning, Flare holds Keyaru's hands and tells him that she feels like he is a beloved person to her, even though she cannot remember him. She also asks for his name, and he tells her that his name is Keyaru. Then she stands up and they hug with their bare bodies the rock. Flare then tells Keyaru that she loves his warmth and smell.
Oh my god! Wow!
At that moment, Keyaru begins to think of how he would redo his life as he has been reborn. He and Flare decide to leave the city for their personal safety, aiming to continue their journey that never existed. On their way out of the city, they see posters being placed for the search of Leonard, as he is accused of killing Princess Flare. Flare notices that Keyaru is smiling, and when she asks him why, he ignores her. As they are about to leave, one of the villagers tells another that they hope Princess Norn would return from her study abroad, so as to console the king. On hearing this, Flare begins to shiver, and Keyaru stops abruptly, and he begins to sweat. Keyaru remembered that Norn was the only person that recognized him, and since he had regained his senses, he did not want to have anything to do with her. In a nightmare, Keyaru recounts how he had seen Flare, Blade, and Bullet practice their magical skills, and Flare tells him to also learn how to fight, so that he would be able to contribute in their fights. Flare also tells Blade and Bullet how they have made Keyaru comfortable, because they are always doing despicable things to him. Then Bullet tells them not to say awful things to Keyaru, and they all laugh at Keyaru, who is in need of drugs. Later that night in Flare's tent, Keyaru is naked, and Flare teases him with a bottle of drug, and opens her floodgates, then pours the drug on it, while she instructs Keyaru to take his drugs. She also proceeds to torture him. Keyaru leaves Flare's tent, and on his way to go and sleep, Blade comes out of her own tent and begins to beat Keyaru up for licking Flare, who she is interested in. Blade also decides to have a taste of Flare's floodgates by kissing Keyaru, which afterwards, she vomits and blames herself for kissing a man, but consoles herself that it is because of her love for Flare. After being violated by Blade, Keyaru enters his tent only to see rose petals everywhere. Then he suddenly hears Bullet's voice, telling him to come closer. Bullet begins to apologize to Keyaru for what Flare and Blade had done to him, then tells Keyaru that he is the only person who loves him, and he would try to make him happy. Bullet begins to work out with Keyaru through his rice cakes, and Keyaru becomes weak as Bullet yells at him that he is in love with him. Bullet hits Keyaru as he pleads that Keyaru should die for him, so that no one would be able to have him until Keyaru loses his consciousness. Keyaru suddenly wakes up from his nightmare, and Flare asks him why he has been yelling in his dream, but he tells her not to worry as he had a bad dream, but as she moves closer to him, he flips her over and tells her that he is happy that he had the dream as he is able to remember what he is supposed to do. After working out with Flare, Keyaru goes out of the tent to wash his face, and he decides that he would be sure to get his revenge on Blade and Bullet as well. Keyaru and Flare leave the imperial capital, and they get to a city called Lanarita, and on getting to the city, Keyaru tells Flare that the city is a free city filled with a lot of vices. They enter a place to eat, and as Flare is about to drink the water, Keyaru tells her that she should not drink it as the water is infected, and it is causing an illness in the city, but the villagers are not aware. Flare asks if she can eat the food, and he tells her that the poison in the food has vanished due to the heat used to cook it, but the water is poisonous. He tells Flare that the water has been contaminated by a monster carcass, and the people are in the early stage of its infection. Back in their room, Keyaru tells Flare that he is willing to help the city, and suddenly, he drinks the water.
Wait a minute.
And Flare asks him why he did so, and he replies her that he wants to create an antidote for the poison using some antibodies he would generate from his body. After making the antidote, Keyaru sees a merchant, and he tells Flare that the merchant would be good for a deal. Then he invites the merchant and his servant, so as to introduce the antidote to them. Keyaru tells the merchant to try the antidote, but instead the merchant gives his messenger, who immediately feels better after taking the antidote. After confirming his servant's health, the merchant named Ledra Goldman takes the antidote and also feels better. Keyaru sells them a box of the antidote by selling each piece for 1 gold coin, and he also makes a deal to allow Goldman to name the price of the next batch of antidote. He then proposes that he would take half of every profit Goldman makes off the antidote. Then after making a deal with Goldman, Keyaru and Flare leave with the money they made. On the way, Flare asks Keyaru why he did not sell the antidote himself, and he tells her that he does not want any trouble from people that would want to attack him because of the recipe. Flare asks where they are heading to, and he replies that he wants to buy something. Soon, they get to a slave market and Flare tries to persuade Keyaru that an explorer is better than a slave, but he explains his need for a slave and she agrees with him. Keyaru tells the owner that he wants to buy a combat slave, but after a series of slaves shown to Keyaru, he only takes interest in one slave that is said to be part of the wolf clan. The slave becomes aggressive and tries to attack Keyaru, but the owner immediately tames the slave by using a magical ring. Keyaru could feel the huge grudge in the kind of the slave, and he tells the owner that he is going to buy the slave, but the man tries to tell him as the slave is a reject that has been classified as a plot slave. Keyaru tells the owner that the slave is just like him, and he would buy her without any complaints in the future. Then he tells the slave that he knows she seeks revenge, and if she follows him, he would be able to help her get the revenge she desires. After that, Keyaru takes the slave home, and after taking off her collar, Flare asks him if it is safe for him to do that, and he tells her that he is sure that the slave would listen to him, even if he takes it off. He also proceeds to heal the slave, and he is able to see that her village was attacked by the Imperial Army, who killed some of her people and also captured her in order to sell her into slavery. He explains her ordeal to Flare, and also tells her that the slave is unable to become stronger than she already is. Just then, Flare begins to feel sorry for the slave, but Keyaru adds that the slave's name is Setsuna. Keyaru also tells Flare that Setsuna wants revenge on the army that took her away from her people. Then he adds that it is not a bad idea to make a princess kill her people, and when Flare asks him what he said, he tells her not to worry about it. Keyaru takes one of his potions, and he drinks it to give it to Setsuna through her mouth.
Wait a minute.
Seeing this, Flare becomes uncomfortable as she is not willing to share her master with anyone, but later that day, Flare and Keyaru goes out to sell another box of antidote to Goldman, and after collecting the money, Keyaru tells Flare on their way home that he is surprised as Goldman has not sent a mob to attack him for the recipe, and Flare also shows her excitement of them making more money and helping people in the process. On getting home, they notice that Setsuna has not woken up. Then, Keyaru tells her that she would wake up soon as she has recovered fully and gained her strength back. He takes the potion and tries to feed Setsuna as usual. Then Flare looks away, but as Keyaru gives Setsuna the antidote, she wakes up and slaps Keyaru hard. Setsuna yells at Keyaru that he is trying to take advantage of her, but Flare immediately yells at her that she has offended the person who helped her, and he was only trying to give her a potion. Flare begins to cry as she tells Setsuna that Keyaru is her master, and he had bought her and healed her. Then Setsuna realizes what she has done. Then she begins to apologize to Keyaru for reacting to him in such a manner. Keyaru begins to wonder why Flare has become so soft in another dimension. Therefore, he introduces himself to Setsuna, and he immediately instructs Flare to go and get them food since he wants to eat in his room. Flare becomes excited, and she tells them that she would take her time as she wants to get an extravagant food for them so as to celebrate Setsuna's recovery. After Flare has gone, Setsuna shows her appreciation to Keyaru and tells him that she has to leave. However, as she tries to attack Keyaru, he captures her and pins her down with her rice cakes. Then he proceeds to ask her why she thought he took off her slave collar, and she explains that he knows that he is much stronger than her, but she asks him who he is, and he tells her that he is an alchemist. He tells her all he knows about her clan and her weakness. Then he proposes to her that he would make her stronger if she is willing to do as he says, but he also adds that the only condition he has is for her to tell him her real name, which is engraved on her soul. Setsuna agrees, and Keyaru tells her that in order to make her stronger, he would have to use his abilities. She immediately tells him that she would do it. Then he begins to remove his clothes, and they both begin to work out. A few minutes later, Setsuna begins to tell Keyaru how she wants him to continue to make her stronger, and he tells her he would get her the revenge she desires. A few days later, Keyaru and the girls learn that the Imperial Army are going to attack the rest of the Wolf Clan, and they all go to a high mountain waiting for the army to strike the village. But as Setsuna sees the soldiers, she becomes angry, and as she tries to attack the soldiers, Keyaru holds her down and tells her that she should be calm as he would go and help her to clear the air before she attacks. The soldiers take out some of the villagers and begin to beat them. Then Keyaru wears a mask and goes into the village, announcing himself as the hero of the sword. But when the soldiers try to attack him, he begins to use Kura's sword abilities and kills most of them. While in the fight, He signals Flare, and she also uses her magic to take down some of the soldiers, and this makes Keyaru happy as the princess is taking down her beloved soldiers. Soon, he calls on Setsuna, who begins to take out the soldiers as well along with her clan members. Keyaru admires the new Flare for not having the same attitude she had before her memory was erased. After the battle, Flare sleeps in the tent dreaming and making happy noises as she calls on Keyaru's name, but Keyaru and Setsuna goes to the source of the illness of the people of Lanarita. Then he asks Setsuna if she wants the town to be cured or not, and she pleads with him to cure the land. After healing the water, the two begin to work out as Keyaru places Setsuna against a tree, and while at it, they both discuss how Setsuna felt when she was having her revenge. While talking, Setsuna makes happy noises and she tells Keyaru that she wants to be stronger, so she wants to have more workouts with him. After, Setsuna tells Keyaru her real name, and she gives her life to him as his humble servant. But after the workout, Setsuna sleeps and Keyaru decides to protect her with his life, and he also proceeds to recount his plans of having his revenge and healing the world. Meanwhile, at the imperial capital, the king meets Leonard, whose face was changed by Keyaru, and he tells Leonard, who now has Keyaru's former face, that he would give him a chance to redeem himself because of the trust Flare had in him. The king orders Leonard to capture Keyaru, and he becomes excited that he would be able to have his revenge on Keyaru for taking his body and changing his face. Meanwhile, in the palace at the imperial capital, Kureha walks in the compound and she overhears two guards talking about the incident that took place in Lanrita, how the said hero of the sword used her family's technique in sword wielding. Setsuna and Flare begin to play in the river, and they both take their bath as well. There, Keyaru watches them as they play in the water. He admires the two girls and also admires Setsuna's survival skills, as she is able to catch fishes for them to eat. He sees as Setsuna bends to catch the fishes, and he immediately takes off his clothes to join them, and asks her if she likes it that way. Being the sucker for sausages that she is, she states that she does not want him to stop, as she only prefers it when they are both alone. Keyaru persuades her that it is okay the way they are. Then he immediately calls Flare to join them, and the three of them begin to work out in the water. Later, the three set out, and while they walk through the city, Setsuna tells Keyaru that she does not want to be in those places, as it reminded her of how she was taken captive as a slave. Keyaru assures her that she would be fine as long as he is with her, and that would also be their last day in the city, as they have helped them to heal the source of their illness. As they walk past a man, he asks Keyaru if he is willing to sell Setsuna to him, but Keyaru tells him politely that she is not for sale, but the man tries to attack Keyaru for trying to be adamant, and Setsuna immediately pounces on the man. At that moment, Keyaru realizes that the man is one of the soldiers that have fled from the battle against the Wolf Clan. He tells the man that his reward is death, and he immediately instructs Setsuna to kill him. On getting to where they are supposed to meet Goldman, he asks them why they came to him late, and Keyaru replies that they had a minor issue on their way. Goldman immediately proposes a deal to Keyaru that he should sell the recipe to him, as he has other big merchants who are willing to pay a huge amount of money for the recipe.
Oh my god! Wow!
Keyaru refuses, and Goldman immediately calls some goons, and as they arrive, Keyaru tells Goldman that he is not willing to cause trouble and tells him he would give him the recipe. Keyaru gives him the recipe and they collect their money. On the way, Flare asks him why he gave out the recipe for the antidote, and he reveals that even with the recipe, they would never be able to make the antidote, as he used some antibodies that he generated in his body to make the antidote. Keyaru adds that Goldman has lost money because he gave the wrong antidote to him. But while they continue to walk, Keyaru suddenly senses danger and wields his sword, only to realize that he is being attacked by Kureha. Kureha accuses Keyaru of killing Flare and also brainwashing two girls in order for them to believe that he is a good hero. Keyaru tells her that she is not supposed to be his enemy, as she had promised him, but she tells him that she does not know who he is. Flare tries to use her magic to fight with Kureha, but she is defeated by the sword's master. Keyaru agrees to fight with Kureha, but he tells Setsuna and Flare to watch and learn from the fight they are about to witness. The two begin to fight, and after a while, Keyaru uses a technique and tries to make Kureha inhale an aphrodisiac, but as she sniffs it, she is able to force herself to restrain it by making a wound around her thigh by cutting it out. Keyaru becomes impressed and continues to fight with her. A few minutes later, Keyaru uses a special technique and cuts Kira's arm off by showing her the pain of the Wolf Clan villagers and how they have suffered in the hands of the Imperial Army.